Anson Jones was born on January 20th, 1798, in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. He was the son of Solomon Jones and his wife, Sarah Strong. In his early life, Anson Jones hoped to become a printing master and a journalist for a newspaper. This passion for news would be quickly pushed to the side when Jones discovered that there was a much bigger paycheck to be had with the medical industry. So Anson attended medical school in Seneca Falls, New York, surely becoming the apprentice of a local doctor. It took only a few years for Jones to graduate and earn his medical degree. He was licensed to practice medicine by the Oneida New York Medical Society. Medical school left Jones with a few things: the title of doctor, and a boatload of debt that would soon start compounding. To start practicing medicine, Dr. Jones moved to Shenango County, New York in 1822, where he opened a new medical practice. He rented out an office, then began to receive a flood of clients. Well, that's what would have happened if Anson Jones got any business, which he did not get much of. The town that he lived in, Bainbridge, wasn't even really a town. It was considered a village. To this day, it's so small that it only has 1,350 residents, and had even less in 1822. So the doctor moved his medical practice further west to Norwich, New York, and rented out a new building. He also slightly changed careers, switching from a doctor to a pharmacist as he opened a drugstore. The debt was starting to snowball in the wrong direction, as his drugstore received very little business. It must be the location, is what he thought before once again moving, further west and a little south this time, to modern-day Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. There, he once again owned and operated a largely unsuccessful drugstore. The debt was starting to become a problem, but if Jones could just find the right location, then he could pay it off in no time. In early 1823, Dr. Jones decided to open his little drugstore in the big city of Philadelphia. Unfortunately for Jones, this is when the past would catch up with him. The doctor would be arrested by his creditor, but was subsequently released, as he promised to pay off his debt by teaching medicine in Philadelphia. So that's exactly what he did, and he also ran a very small medical office as well. And for the first time in his life, Anson Jones' bank account went from red to green, which is why the next decision that he made is a perplexing one. In 1824, only about 2 years after coming to Philadelphia, he left. Location is key, and he had thought that he had found the lock, but was sorely disappointed as he opened another unsuccessful business venture. This time in the newly independent country of Grand Colombia. More specifically, he went to Venezuela. I'm sure he enjoyed the warm weather. This also would have been Anson's first experience with Latino culture. It is unknown what Jones did while in Venezuela, but we can assume that whatever he did, he lost money. In 1826, Jones returned to Philadelphia with new hopes in his eyes. He was a licensed doctor, but he never received an MD degree. He attended Jefferson Medical School in Philadelphia and earned his MD by 1827. Despite being considered a failed doctor, Jones managed to develop quite a reputation. This can be seen as he was a Grand Master of a Masonic Lodge, an Independent Order of Oddfellows Lodge, and a Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, which is odd considering his finances and levels of success that he never achieved. Jones would finally give up on being a doctor in 1832 and would move from Philadelphia once again, this time going to the city of New Orleans. 1832 also happened to be the year that New Orleans would experience an outbreak of both cholera and yellow fever, which Anson would catch both of. After fighting off these two diseases, one after the other, he had enough of this new city. His friend, Jeremiah Brown, told Jones about the growing number of American settlers in Texas, so he decided to check it out for himself. He arrived in Texas for the first time in 1833, but was left pretty unimpressed by it. He was about to leave and go back to his disease-ridden New Orleans, but the citizens in the Texan town of Brazoria pleaded for him to stay. Wait, the people actually wanted Jones? Could it be? Did he finally find the right location? The answer would be yes, because after deciding on staying, he went back into medicine and opened up his medical practice again. This new location would gross the now successful doctor around $120,000 in modern estimates. Finally, he had found wealth and success in the medical industry. Then in 1834, he helped co-founding the first Masonic Lodge in Texas, which he would become the first Grand Master of. When the Texas Revolution broke out in 1835, Jones did not hesitate to enlist in the army of Sam Houston. He joined with the army as the rank of a private, although his role was to be one of the very few field surgeons that Texas had. It was probably after the Battle of San Jacinto that Anson Jones extensively spoke to the wounded Sam Houston. Houston, having shattered his ankle, was told by Jones to get better treatment in America. The Republic of Texas had begun, and Jones triumphantly returned to Brazoria, but a surprise waited for him there. In his doctor office was a man. More specifically, it was James Collingworth, and in Anson's absence, he decided to convert his office into a law office. I don't know why, he just kinda took it while Jones was gone. Feeling insulted, and rightfully so, Jones threatened Collingsworth to a duel. Luckily, it would not escalate past this, and the duel never occurred. Later on, James Collingworth would be the second of two men who killed themselves after being put on the presidential ballot during the second Texan election. In the first Texan government, Jones was appointed to be the chairman of Foreign Relations, which he staunchly opposed the American annexation of Texas. He was also the chairman on the Committee of Privileges and Elections. This role would see Jones try to regulate medical practice. In June of 1838, President Sam Houston appointed Jones as the minister to the U.S., but on one condition. From here on out, Jones would have to be pro-annexation. This, he wholeheartedly accepted. But only a year later, in 1839, Jones would be booted from his government seat by the new president, Maribel B. Lamar. Jones decided to retire from politics after this and continued to practice medicine in Brazoria, until one day, he was called to serve in the new government when a member of the Texan House of Representatives died. It was Jones who was selected to fill the role. In this, he was very vocally against President Lamar's economic and military policies. He was also elected as president pro tempore in 1840. After Lamar's presidency was over, Anson could finally return to Brazoria, but not so fast because he just got promoted to another government seat. After winning the 1841 election, President Sam Houston appointed Jones as his Secretary of State. This was a chance for the already decorated Anson Jones to become even more established in politics, so he accepted the role. Sam had a special mission for Jones, as he put him in control of foreign relations. Trying to gain recognition from European countries would increase the likelihood of US annexation, but Jones worked on both things at the same time to achieve the ultimate goal of annexation. Through this plan is where Anson Jones would earn his most famous moniker, Eyebrows. Just kidding, his real nickname was the Architect of Annexation. He would work at this strategy until it seemed like his work had paid off in 1844. US President John Tyler just passed the annexation of Texas to be voted on in the US Senate. There, it would be shot down, as all of Anson's hard work seemed to go down the drain. But there was still hope, seeing as a new US presidential candidate would run on a platform focused towards the annexation of Texas, and James K. Polk would win that election in 1845. But a week before he is set to take office, President Tyler puts the question of annexation back to Congress. This time, they accept. At this point, Anson Jones was already the fourth president of Texas, running on the same ideas and platform that his predecessor Sam Houston ran on. That should be it then. Texas should get annexed now. Except, it didn't. The other part of Jones's plans was to gain recognition from European countries, namely the country of Britain. Britain had told Jones to wait 90 days until Texas could vote on annexation, so they could finalize their own treaty with Mexico. So for 90 whole days, Jones sits there as president of Texas and does nothing at all. These 3 short months would ruin his whole political career. After the 90 days were up, Jones sent the question of Texas annexation to the Texas Congress. The Congress complied and annexation was due to occur. They just needed to pick a date now. The 2 countries decided that the end of Anson's presidency would be the date. The date was February 19, 1846. For the remaining 2 years, Anson did nothing. He already achieved his campaign promise. Now it was just time to sit back and relax. The last official act of Jones, and any Texas president for that matter, was to lower the flag of the Republic of Texas, and in its place, raise the American flag in the Texan capital of Austin. His last words, as president, were, "The Republic of Texas is no more." And with that, Texas became part of America. As for Anson, he retired to the town of Barrington, Texas, where he became a successful farmer. Anson wanted to remain in Texas politics, but was largely shunned for his 90 days of do-nothingness. A few years later, in 1849, Jones would fall from his horse. This would leave him with a very immobile and crippled left arm. Then, in 1857, after the suicide of a Texan politician, Jones was convinced that he would get called to join the House of Representatives. But as he ran, he received 0 votes. With a ruined political career and a crippled arm, Anson Jones joined the many Texas politicians that committed suicide. He would shoot himself on January 9, 1858, just 11 days shy of his 60th birthday.